A dinner interrupted, a fork that fell not once, but twice, and a murder hidden in plain sight. Welcome to Mystery Parlor. I am your host, Axon. Tell me where you're tuning in from. I love hearing from all of you. Let's uncover the truth. If you've never watched a man take a moral position with a fork, you've never had lunch with Nero Wolfe. It was Tuesday, 1:20, and the brownstone on West 35th was doing its daily impersonation of a monastery, quiet, ritualized, and intolerant of improvisation. Fritz had produced a trout amandine that made me consider the possibilities of an honest life, and Wolfe, who holds trout and almonds on approximately the same rung as the 10 Commandments, had allowed himself the faintest, most delicate grunt, which, translated from Wolfe to English, meant acceptable. We were halfway through when it happened. A fork fell, not Wolfe's, and not mine. It came from the kitchen, a bright little clatter with the timbre of thin tines skittering over tile. Fritz has as much chance of dropping silverware as Wolfe does of taking the subway. So I looked at Wolfe, and Wolfe looked at nobody. He shut his eyes, tilted his head, and said, "Inadmissible." That sounded admissible to me, I said. Sounded like a fork doing a swan dive. Fritz does not drop things, Wolfe said. If he does, it is not a mistake, it is a message. He lifted his glass of beer, inspected the color the way a jeweler inspects an emerald, and had a sip. Go and read it. I went. Fritz met me at the swing door, looking not guilty but annoyed, which is the Fritz version of panic. He's lean and precise, and his clothes never wrinkle unless they've been threatened with a knife. "I did not drop it," he said before I asked. "She did?" "Who's she?" He lifted his chin toward the back entrance, where we receive deliveries and the occasional stray soul who has ignored the front bell in the belief that our house is a hotel. A young woman stood there at the threshold between kitchen tile and the little mud mat, hands tucked in the pockets of a neat navy coat. The coat's cut said expensive, but the way she wore it said she'd put it on without asking a mirror's permission. She was steady on her feet, but her pupils were doing fast arithmetic. "I knocked," she said. No one answered. Then she nodded at Fritz, opened, and I suppose I startled him. Fritz, affronted, made a noise that implied he had not been startled since the Kaiser had whiskers. "Except I didn't," she added, and her mouth curved at herself. I dropped my fork. "Your fork?" I said. She produced it from her coat pocket like a magician with a flat rabbit. It was a cheap stainless piece, diner grade, with the kind of dull shine you get for 30 cents a pound, if that's how they sell forks. It looked like it had seen duty as a screwdriver and a paint stirrer. "I picked it up from the sidewalk," she said. "I needed something to knock with. The bell didn't work for me." "Miss," I said, "our doorbell is a stubborn but law-abiding citizen. You can file a complaint, but it'll pass inspection. In the meantime, people who want to see Nero Wolfe try the front door, not the kitchen." She looked past me toward the dining room as if she could smell trout and respect it. "This is urgent," she said, and I was told I had 13 minutes to make an impression. By who? She considered that and decided honesty might be time efficient. "By a woman who doesn't like me," she said, "and who shouldn't know where I was going." "Archie," Fritz said. "Mr. Wolfe is waiting." I've learned over the years that the fastest way to annoy Wolfe is to let him wonder. I put a hand out to guide the visitor toward the dining room. She came along with a gait that had no squeak to it, the way people move when they've practiced not getting in other people's way. Wolfe didn't rise, naturally. He examined her with the same neutral consideration he gives a new pastry. Her hair was clipped close in a style that doesn't occur to you unless you've once had to outrun a door, and her eyes were gray if you believe in labels, which I don't. She had a face that could sit through a sermon and not twitch. "Miss," Wolfe said, "you have interrupted lunch." "I'm sorry," she said, and to my surprise, it sounded like she meant it and wasn't just vacuuming up manners to keep the air clean. "I can wait, She lifted the stainless fork. "This was the best doorbell I could find." "Throw it away," Wolfe said. "If you intend to hire me, we'll do it without props." "I can't," she said. "It fell twice." He didn't move, but the corner of his mouth dipped. "That's a Wolfe tell. He doesn't like riddles unless he wrote them." "Expound," he said. She stepped closer to the table. "My name is Eliza Vale. I work at Prentice & Doyle. Publishing, legal, and talent management, depending on the door you use. I'm executive assistant to Miriam Prentice." She said it like a fact, not an apology, which is how people say, "I hold the leash." "Condense," Wolfe said. "Today at 11:23 in Miriam's office, I heard a fork fall. It was ridiculous because we don't keep cutlery there, and also because it was followed by an email." "From the fork?" I asked. Eliza gave me a look you give a dog that has made a joke at dinner and will not be smacked for it. "From Miriam," she said. "She was in the room with me, but the email was from her, sent to me, time-stamped as if it had been scheduled to go out exactly when the fork dropped. Subject line, 'Do not reschedule 4 p.m. Archibald Goodwin.' Body, a single word, fork." Wolfe's eyes came to me like a subpoena. "Archie, I don't know any forks," I said. "Knives, a few." Eliza didn't smile. The second fork fell at 12:41. Different room, different building, same sound. I was walking up your front steps, and the email came in as I reached for the bell. My personal account, this time from a dummy address. Same subject, same body. I haven't given my personal email to anyone in the office. Wolfe's gaze went slate. He set his napkin beside his plate with a precision that would get you promoted in Switzerland. "You are here why?" "Because the 4 o'clock was already on your calendar," she said. "Except I didn't put it there, and I'm the only one who has access. Also because Miriam is not the type to schedule meetings through omens. Also because last Thursday she asked me how much noise a fork makes on marble." "Pfui," Wolfe said. It wasn't an insult. It was a weather report. "Clouds moving in. You told Mr. Goodwin you had 13 minutes, yet you've spent 5. Who set your deadline?" "My sense of self-preservation," she said. "At 1 o'clock, the House Counsel for Prentice & Doyle is calling me to discuss an IT anomaly. At 1:15, Miriam is going to ask why there's a private appointment on her calendar that she didn't make and why it references an investigator she's never met. At 1:30, a server will go down in a way that cannot be explained and a file will be inaccessible. I don't want to be near any of those events when they're looking for someone to blame." "Which file?" I asked. She hesitated. Wolfe waited, forked a sliver of trout, and had the patience of a stone. "Fork," she said. "That's the file name. We don't keep case files named after utensils, but then we also don't send emails from empty rooms." "Miss Vale," Wolfe said, "if this is a joke, it is an expensive one. If it is not, it is clumsy." He eyed the kitchen as if the orchids upstairs might be listening and learning bad habits. "Who is the woman who does not like you?" "Cass Pierce," she said. "Senior talent. She handles authors who come with Flannery O'Connor morals and social media appetites. She thinks assistants should be invisible. I have not been." "Meaning?" "I told Miriam last month that Cass was siphoning inquiries through a personal address and nudging certain clients toward a separate, consulting arrangement." Eliza looked at her knuckles. They were pale, like they'd been making fists inside pockets for practice. "Miriam thanked me. Then she did nothing. Cass started being nice to me. I'm a student of the human face. I do not enjoy being the subject." Wolfe shut his eyes again and breathed through his nose, which is what he does when he's assembling a shape from floating parts. "And the fork?" "I don't know what it means," she said. "I only know this. Someone with access and malice is leaving timed. Taps on my day. Today there are 2, The first said, "Go to Wolfe." The second said, "Hurry." Fritz, who had crept in to refill Wolfe's glass and to glare at the cheap fork like it had insulted his mother, cleared his throat. "Mr. Wolfe," he said, "if I may." "You may not," Wolfe said, then sighed and allowed it. "Speak." "In my cupboard," Fritz said, "there is a jar of saffron. It was moved 1 inch to the right this morning. I did not move it." Eliza's head came up fast. "Someone was in my apartment last night," she said, and looked annoyed with herself for saying it. "They didn't take anything. They moved a comb. It's a silly thing. I told myself I imagined it." "People who move small things," Wolfe said, "are either incompetent thieves or competent messengers. The distinction is crucial." I leaned against the door jamb. "You buy this, boss?" "I buy nothing," Wolfe said. "I rent possibilities. Miss Vale, do you have proof of any of this? Screenshots, logs, an email you will not forward because it will vanish if you do?" "I printed the calendar card that shows the 4 o'clock with your name," she said, and handed me a sheet from an inside pocket. It was crisp and warm, with the kind of heat you get from machines that insist they are working. The details were exact. Nero Wolfe, private consultation, 4 p.m. It had been created by Admin Vale, which, she admitted with a wince, was her own handle. She hadn't made it. "Someone wants you at our door," I said. "Or wants you fired for letting me near it," she said. Wolfe nodded once. "Terms," he said, like a judge calling a case. "I can pay," Eliza said. "Not Wolfe rates, but—" Wolfe showed her a palm. "Phooey. The fee is my consideration. First, I will decide if this is a problem. Then I will decide whose. If it is yours, and if I take it, you will pay what I ask, which will be tolerable. If it is mine, you will leave and not look back." "Yours?" she said. "This house is a fortress," he said. "When forks fall where they should not, I take an interest." Her mouth did that small curve again. "I like rules," she said. "They make good enemies." "Archie," Wolfe said, "you will go with Miss Vale. Collect the following: a printout of the email headers, the calendar audit log, the server access record for the last 48 hours, and a list of anyone with right permissions on Miss Prentice's calendar. If anyone prevaricates, you will wrinkle your coat and sigh. Miss Vale, you will obtain these without telling anyone you are obtaining them. Any resistance, you retreat and telephone me immediately. No forks." Eliza nodded. "And at 4? "At 4, Wolfe said. "I will be here in my chair, available to anyone who has the effrontery to keep an appointment I did not make." He picked up his fork, considered it, and set it down again. "Also, Fritz," he said, "bring me that saffron jar when we finish. If it has been moved, it has a story to tell." Eliza looked at the table, at the trout, and at Wolfe with a quick inventory of his contour in the big chair. "I shouldn't have come into your kitchen," she said. "You shouldn't have dropped the fork," he corrected, "but perhaps someone needed to hear it." "And if the second fork falls?" she asked. "It won't," Wolfe said. "Once is accident, twice is a signal. 3 times is war. We will not have war in this house over cutlery." He closed his eyes, not dismissing her so much as filing her, and I took that as the bell. I got my hat from the office, where it lives on a hook that doesn't dare sag, and Eliza waited in the hall like someone who prefers to stand in corners and watch the door. On our way out, the front bell rang, obedient as a trained dog. I opened. The steps were empty. A slim cardboard mailer lay on the top stair, anonymous and flat. Eliza bent, picked it up, and handed it to me. No address, no postage, no fingerprints unless you count the cities. "Leave it," I said. "Take it," she said. We looked at each other and reached the same conclusion for different reasons. I tucked it under my arm, locked the door, and we went down the steps together. Behind us, somewhere in the quiet kitchen, a fork made a small, precise tap. It didn't fall. It announced. I didn't open the mailer on the steps because I make a habit of not advertising my curiosity to the street. In the cab, with the driver using his horn as a second language, I slid a thumb under the flap. No glitter bomb, no fanfare. One item, wrapped in cheap deli wax, a stainless fork, diner grade, same pedigree as the one Eliza had flashed in our kitchen. This one had a strip of label maker tape stuck to the handle, white on black, the sort of thing you use when you've run out of nouns. It read, "Audit the auditor." Eliza watched it like it might recite poetry. "Someone enjoys themselves," she said. "Someone wants you to think they do," I told her. "There's a difference. Smell that?" She leaned, cautious. "Citrus cleaner," she said. "Not ours at home." "Possibly yours at work," I said, and folded it back into the paper. Chain of custody is a religion for some people. Mr. Wolfe isn't a parishioner, but he likes evidence that doesn't talk back. Midtown did what Midtown does when the clock thinks about 1 p.m. It jostled. Prentice and Doyle had a lobby that believed in being noticed. Brass letters, stone floor. The kind of reception desk you could land a light plane on. The guard on duty had shoulders that said football and eyes that said arithmetic. Eliza flashed a badge. He nodded like he knew her heartbeat and typed something that changed nothing. "Afternoon," I told him. "Archie Goodwin, visiting the world of letters." He glanced at my hat, which is what happens when a man in a hat uses sarcasm in a building with board members. "Welcome to Prentice and Doyle," he said. "Try the elevators. They're very modern." Eliza didn't waste breath on chatter. In the elevator, she told me 2 things quick. Miriam Prentice was a 4th-generation executive with a sterling jawline and a taste for deliverables. Cass Pierce had clawed her way to senior talent with the sort of charm that leaves handprints. Both liked results, and both disliked surprises. Eliza liked rules. "They get you through the door," she said. "I don't know what gets you back out." "Shoes with laces," I said, "and a habit of not telling lies you can't remember." On the 12th floor, the carpet had that corporate softness that eats footsteps. Glass office fronts, brushed metal handles, an art consultant's confidence. Miriam's outer office was Eliza's territory. A clean desk, 2 monitors, a plant so healthy it made me suspect doping, and a framed photo turned a 1/4 inch off straight. "You do that?" I asked. "No," she said, and straightened it with a single finger. "This morning I thought I'd knocked it. I hadn't." "Add 1 to the list of small moves," I said. "Where do the bits live?" She sat, slid into the chair with muscle memory, and woke the screens. Her face changed. Not fear. She wasn't built for that in public. Focus. She opened the calendar back end with a speed that said she'd taken notes at its christening. "Audit log," she said. "Last 48 hours." The entries lined like marching ants. She scrolled, eyes running ahead of the text. "There," she said, and pointed. "Yesterday, 3:17 a.m., a creation event, private consultation, Nero Wolfe, created by Admin Vale. Source IP, internal. Device, unknown." "You sleep at 3:17, I asked, religiously. "Also, unknown means a device our inventory doesn't recognize. It shouldn't be able to write to this." "Unless someone invited it to the party," I said. "Any RSVP?" She drilled a level deeper. The system offered a MAC address that didn't match any on their sheet, and a device nickname that would have been funny if it hadn't been trying to be Diner 002. "Subtlety is dead," Eliza said. "No," I said. "It's wearing a name tag. Copy all that. Headers next." She pivoted. The email that had landed at 11:23 sat in her inbox, looking innocent and small, which is how poison travels. She pulled the raw headers. "Spoofing, yes, but not amateur hour. Whoever had set the schedule had bounced it through a mail relay that belongs to people who like fines. The timestamps matched the fork's music. Her phone hummed. She looked at the screen and didn't answer. "House counsel," she said. 1 o'clock, like clockwork. I'll call back. I need 5 more minutes. Wolfe said you retreat if someone makes a fuss, I reminded her. House counsel doesn't fuss, she said. He audits. I will not be audited while I am collecting evidence of the audit. Your commitment to nouns is admirable, I told her, and watched the corridor. People did what office people do on a Tuesday after lunch, returned from sandwiches, arranged their faces. Cass Pierce arrived like wind, tall, clean lines, an expensive blouse that had opinions. She saw Eliza and saw me, and made a note on her face. She drifted past, double-tapped on Miriam's glass with a knuckle, and went in without waiting. The door shut. The glass kept its secrets. Cass played college tennis, Eliza said, not looking up. You can tell by the way she opens doors. I stepped to the reception station that handled the floor. A woman with a grin that said she'd seen it all and filed it under Thursday offered me a pen I didn't need. You're not a writer, she said. God, no, I said. I'm allergic to adjectives. How's your day? Normal, she said. Which is to say someone's crying in a conference room and someone else is writing an all-hands email about feelings. Anyone drop a fork? She blinked. In this place? We've broken relationships, markets, and 3 chairs. But forks? Not yet. Behind me, Eliza's printer started and then reconsidered. The paper inching out stopped as if it had been told a secret. Eliza swore under her breath, an elegant, whispered thing, and tried again. Nothing. 1:15, she said, checking the corner of her screen. Server anomaly incoming. Prediction, meet reality, I said. What did you get? She held up a slim stack of warm paper she'd printed before the hiccup. The calendar audit entry, the header, print, a permission list. Write permissions on Miriam's calendar, she said. Me, Miriam, her husband, don't ask, and admin ops group. No one else. But look. She pointed at a last modified entry for a different calendar event. A recurring staff meeting tagged Cass Out Pipeline had been adjusted this morning, 6 a.m., moving 3 regular attendees to a different time that overlapped with, guess what, the present. The modifier was an admin ops service account. Cass's people are busy, Eliza said. Less traffic in the corridor. Fewer eyes on who comes to Miriam's door. Nice, I said. Someone wanted our aisle clear. Her phone hummed again. She sent the call to voicemail. A new email arrived, subject line blank, body empty except for a dot. The sender was the same dummy that had delivered fork at the steps. Eliza opened the full headers out of habit. I leaned and pointed. Return path says no one, I told her, but the relay took it at 12:41. We were on your steps then. I told you the bell didn't want me, she said. I took the fork from my pocket, the one with the label. Audit the auditor, I read. That mean you? It means Miriam, Eliza said. She audits everyone, or it means Cass. She audits the auditors and sends them wine. You sound fond. I'm fond of clean lists, she said. Cass is a smudge. Miriam's door opened. She had a jawline an ancestor would recognize in oil paint. Cass slipped out ahead of her and saw us again, this time without the pleasant glaze. She stopped at Eliza's desk. If you're doing favors, do one for yourself, she told Eliza. Delete anything clever. Define clever, Eliza said. Exactly, Cass said, and went on. Miriam approached with an executive smile that could do business or funerals. Eliza, she said, and then to me. And you are? Archie Goodwin, I said. I'm the 4 o'clock. Her smile didn't crack. It refined. Are you? She said. How industrious of our calendar. You'll forgive me if I prefer to choose my own guests. I prefer it too, I said. It keeps me from arriving where I'm not wanted. She looked at Eliza. What are we doing? Collecting logs for IT, Eliza said. They reported an anomaly on the calendar back end. I wanted to get ahead of the jargon. Good, Miriam said. Stay ahead of it. And tell me why my calendar thinks I'm free at 4. We'll know in 5 minutes, Eliza said. Miriam nodded as if time owed her something and went back in. The corridor swallowed her. Eliza exhaled. If I were moving pieces, she said, I'd want you on the premises at 4. I'd want Miriam angry. I'd want Cass elsewhere. I'd want our logs tidy after. And what would you want left behind? I asked. She considered the plant, the printer, the door camera with its blue LED, the frame she'd straightened. Evidence of competence, she said, by someone who doesn't work here. Diner 022, I said. Our jokester took lunch. Her phone buzzed a 3rd time. She answered. Yes, she said, and listened. Yes, I see the outage. I have preliminary prints. I'll bring them down. She hung up and stood. It wants me, she said. They'll talk nicer to me than to you. They always do, I said. I'll look at the corridor, breathe your air, and try not to be clever. She started, then paused, and touched the corner of the picture frame she'd straightened. With the pad of her finger, she nudged it 1/8 of an inch off. Bait, she said. For who? For whoever can't stand it, she said, and went. I took a chair near the glass, put my hat on my knee, and admired the modern age at work. Across the way, a man in shirt sleeves noticed the crooked frame through the glass and twitched. He took a step toward it, stopped, remembered boundaries, and retreated with a suffering look. Good, but not our quarry. 2 minutes later, the blue LED beside Eliza's door camera blinked once, like an eye that had decided to answer a question. I wrote the time in my book. Then I looked at the fork in wax paper and thought about small moves and about a jar of saffron that had something to say. The blue blink on the camera stayed in my mind the way a bad alibi does. 1 flick, nothing more, but it meant somebody had been looking in when they didn't have the right. I wrote the time down, closed the notebook, and decided not to mention it to anyone in a lobby that enjoyed surveillance for breakfast. Eliza came back 8 minutes later, looking like someone who'd been asked a question with no correct answer. It thinks the logs are corrupted, she said. They're already scrubbing them. She handed me a folded sheet, what she'd copied before the sweep began. These might be all that survives. Then you'll get Wolfe's thanks, which is not common currency. I tucked the sheet away. What did they ask you? Whether I had run any manual edits, whether I'd authorized external access, whether I thought the name Diner 02 was funny. She adjusted her sleeve and lowered her voice. They were leading. They want me to say I touched it. Rule 1, I said. Don't confess to a crime you didn't commit, especially if they wrote it for you. The printer clicked again. Not a job, just a faint mechanical twitch, like an echo of itself. We both turned. The tray was empty, but the screen displayed a line of text. Forks do not fall alone. Then it blinked off. That isn't a system message, Eliza said. No, I said. That's a script. She moved fast, pulling the power cord. The monitor went black. A junior assistant down the hall poked his head out, frowned, and went back to his cubicle. Eliza whispered, They're inside. Maybe, I said. Or maybe they want us to think they are. Both work. I folded the moment into memory and checked the corridor. Miriam was still sealed in conference with someone, her shadow visible on the frosted glass. Cass had vanished, which didn't surprise me. People like Cass prefer to exit when the air thickens. I told Eliza to sit like nothing had happened. She obeyed with a stiffness that meant she was fighting the urge to pace. I used the lull to stroll down the hallway, not like a detective, but like a man killing time while waiting for an appointment. My eyes kept track of reflections in glass and the rhythm of open doors. Most were empty. A few had clerks who looked like their souls had been bartered for quarterly goals. None looked like they cared about forks. On my way back, I passed a supply closet door left an inch ajar. I pushed it gently and saw nothing but shelves of toner, paper, and a smell of lemon polish. The light was off, but the air was warmer than it should have been. Somebody had been there. I shut it and made a mental note. Back at Eliza's desk, she'd angled her monitor back on, power restored. The printer no longer offered existential commentary. Whatever script was running, it cleared, she said. If I tell it, they'll laugh until they remember they're liable. Then don't tell them, I said. We'll tell Wolfe. At that, her shoulders loosened slightly. He won't laugh. No, he'll grumble, which is worse. But it means he's thinking. We were still speaking low when Miriam opened her door. She beckoned Eliza with 2 fingers. Come, she said, and disappeared back inside. Eliza glanced at me, gathered her folder, and went. I stayed put, the obedient 4 o'clock, but tilted my chair enough to keep a line of sight. Through the frosted glass, I saw silhouettes. Miriam standing, Eliza seated, papers passed, voices muffled, then a sharper edge, Miriam's hand chopping air. A pause, Eliza's still profile. Cass entered again, tall shadow cutting across the light. All 3 in a tableau that felt like a stage play in which the scenery had something to say. 5 minutes passed. Eliza emerged with her lips pressed together, clutching her folder like a shield. Miriam followed, nodded to me without affection, and said to Eliza, "Finish with IT, then my office. We'll settle the calendar." She turned back in, door shutting firm. Eliza exhaled. "She doesn't believe me," she said quietly. "She thinks I touched the calendar." "Then she's predictable," I said. "And Cass?" Cass suggested she suspend my access until the anomaly clears. "That sounds like Cass," I said. "Did Miriam agree?" "No," Eliza said. "Not yet." That yet hung like a pending axe. I looked at my watch. 2:20. Wolfe's 4 o'clock was edging closer, and when the room was arranging itself like chess pieces. Miriam suspicious, Cass maneuvering, IT sanitizing, and Eliza caught in the center. We didn't need more suspects. We had enough. But we needed more motive. Why Fawkes? Why Wolfe's name? Why Eliza as the hinge? Her phone buzzed again. She silenced it. "Counsel again," she said. "I'll take it downstairs. Will you stay?" "Like a paperweight," I said. She went, and I watched her vanish into the elevator. Alone, I checked the supply closet again. Still warm. Still lemon. I pressed a hand to the wall. A faint hum, not mechanical. A fan, maybe. I backed out and wrote another note. By the time Eliza returned, 10 minutes later, she was pale. "They're preparing an incident report. I'll be named." "Don't worry," I said. "You're working for Wolfe now. He doesn't lose clients by accident." Her eyes sharpened at that word. Client. It was the first time we'd said it aloud. She nodded once. "Then I'll survive until 4, she said. "Until then," I said, "we watch the Fawkes." As if on cue, the crooked frame above her desk, bait she'd left, was straightened. Neither of us had touched it. The camera's blue LED blinked twice. That was when I knew Wolfe wouldn't just grumble. He'd call it war. I don't like coincidences that come with stage directions. The frame straightened itself, the camera blinked twice, and somewhere a script kiddie with manners was counting beats. I tilted the frame back off true with 2 fingers, casual as a yawn, and let my eyes drift to the door camera. Another blink, not the lazy heartbeat of a powered diode. An answer. Whoever was watching couldn't resist Tady. Good. People who can't resist something are the easiest kind to catch. Eliza kept her hands folded on the blotter so precisely a nun would have signed her report. It moved, she said, voice low. Uh-huh. And our audience clapped twice. I leaned, as if tying a shoe, and let my hat brim shade my face while my fingers reached up and ghosted the camera lens for half a second. Just a brush. The blue light stuttered to a steady on, then dimmed, like someone remote had cursed softly and reconnected. Don't do that again, Eliza murmured. Only once, I said. We're just letting them know we feel the breeze. I took a stroll that would read to any passing HR rep as restlessness and to a less literate type as indigestion. The supply closet still had its door an inch shy of honest. I went in, clicked the light with a knuckle, and frowned at the decor. Toner boxes, paper reams, a crate of corporate mugs that think jokes are a brand. On the back wall, tucked behind a stack of citrus-scented wipes, an outlet hosted a cube that didn't belong to anything but itself. White plastic, no logo, a slit on the side where a micro-LED could dream. The warm breath in the room had a source, and it wasn't toner. I didn't touch it. Wolfe likes my fingers where the DA can't ask what they were doing. I crouched, read the outlet's dust halo, and saw the smudge you get when something's been plugged and unplugged enough times to learn the steps. Next to the cube, a slim black rectangle rested on the baseboard with Velcro. Someone had peeled it off in a hurry and left the mate. I took a photo with my phone. One quick click and slid back out, killing the light. Eliza had stayed put and professional. Miriam's door was shut. The frosted shadow said she was pacing. Cass's door down the hall was open to a scene of tidy absence, laptop, notebook, a bottle of water that wouldn't get fingerprints because it never does. Do you have building maintenance right of way in that closet? I asked Eliza as I sat. Housekeeping AM and PM facilities when something breaks. Why? Because someone broke privacy in there and brought their own fix, I said. Outlet parasite. Could be a network bridge. Could be a toy from a catalog that ships in plain brown and charges in crypto. Her jaw ticked. Facilities uses cedar clean. That closet smells like lemons. Duly scented, I said. Does housekeeping come with cards? Yes, she said. Quiet wheels, lemon wipes, excellent gossip. Names? Her fingers danced on the keyboard. She pulled a roster and slid it to me. 3 staff and a contractor. Today's roster starred R. Solano, 11:30-2:30 window, this floor. Solano, I said. Does he straighten frames? Everyone straightens frames, she said, with the bleakness of a woman who has straightened her share. But they don't touch cameras, unless they're asked to. We were interrupted by a ping that didn't belong to her mail. It came from my pocket. I took out the burner I carry when we're expecting fireworks and saw a text from home. A single word from Fritz. Saffron. That meant he'd brought the jar to Wolfe and it had not been boring. News from the kitchen, I told Eliza. Our jar sings. Her eyes asked the question. I shook my head. Later. First we keep these forks from falling into your lap. I phoned the brownstone. Fritz answered, which he does like answering phones, is a sacrament. Mr. Goodwin, he said. The saffron is not saffron. It is safflower and orange peel. The weight is wrong. The lid had been opened and replaced with the care of a liar. Any note under the label? A sliver, he said. Paper, very thin. Mr. Wolfe is reading. He is not smiling. Put him on if he isn't in a mood to scold. Wolfe took it without preliminary. Archie. Supply closet parasite. Likely network, I said. Camera outside Eliza's desk blinks twice when we move bait. Printer played poet. It is scrubbing and steering suspicion to Eliza. Cass is mobile. Miriam is suspicious. Housekeeping named Solano has midday access. The paper in the saffron said, he intoned, 2 falls make a pattern, 3 summon judgment. He exhaled through his nose. He is coarse. He? Anyone who writes epigrams for housewives on diet tea, he said. Do not remove the parasite. Photograph. Make a note of serial numbers, if any, but do not handle. The 4 o'clock will proceed. We will receive the author of these antics if he is so disposed. Cass? Cass, Miriam, and whoever is so invested in frames that he cannot abide a canted picture. If Miss Pierce is not present at 4, you will procure her by remark. Eliza is about to be named in an incident report. Puis, he said, you will preempt it. Find someone who would prefer she not be disciplined. There is always one. Her husband, I said. Miriam's? No, Wolfe said. A person whose day runs on her competence. A junior who cannot fetch his own words without her calendar. Flatter him with catastrophe. He hung up because he was finished, which is a habit that will get him into heaven ahead of schedule. Orders, Eliza said. Don't touch anything with a smell, I said. We need Cass and Miriam at 4, plus someone whose fingers itch around, frames. Also, who leans on you the most. Elijah, she said without thinking. Junior agent. He can't tell time without help. Good. I went to his glass box and knocked. He looked up with the guilt of a man whose browser knows his secrets. You Elijah? I asked. Yes? He had hair that fell into his eyes on purpose and a tie that had given up. Can I? You can keep Eliza in her seat by telling Miriam you need her to finish the pitch deck for the 6 o'clock. If she's suspended, your deck dies, you miss numbers, and a director cries. Tell Miriam that, and bless her with urgency. He blinked, then nodded at the pure instinct to survive that keeps juniors alive. I can do that. Now, I said. He went. 2 minutes later, Miriam's door opened. Elijah slid in, talked fast, gestured with the folder of a drowning man who has learned props. Miriam listened, looked out at Eliza, and made the smallest motion with 2 fingers. Stay. Eliza looked at me. I shrugged like a magician who has made a card appear and doesn't want to explain where it lived. Housekeeping arrived before 2:50. Cart rolling, lemon preceding, R. Solano in a polo with a logo that believed in fonts. He had forearms like rope and the gentle face of a man who knows where people keep their crumbs. He did a tour of the corridor, dusting, emptying, aligning a visitor chair so its legs made square. He saw the crooked frame and felt the itch. His hand lifted, hovered, then retreated. He shook his head at himself. Good man. At Eliza's door, he reached for the camera, not to touch the lens, but to wipe the casing with a cloth that smelled like a fruit bowl. The blue LED flicked, his eyes flicked too. Not surprise, recognition. He wiped, moved on. At the supply closet he opened, went inside, stayed 15 seconds, and came out with the cart a hair lighter. I stepped into his path, easy smile. Afternoon, I said. You got a spare fork? He stared, then grinned because life gives you sailors and clowns and you choose. No forks, sir, only spoons. Shame, I said, and let him pass. When he vanished into the elevator, I went to the closet. The outlet was empty. The Velcro mate still clung to the baseboard like a regret. The warmth was fading. Eliza was already dialing her own desk phone with a code that pings the camera log. Access, she said, reading. Internal viewer on the office cam at 12:47, 12:51, 1:02, 2:48. Credentials, admin ops. Your parasite had an escort, I said. We just watched him leave. And we can't prove what he carried, she said. We can at 4, I said, if someone expects to see their work on stage. I put the crooked back in the frame and sat where the camera could see me and the wax-wrapped fork on my knee. The office felt like a lung-holding air. Across the hall, Miriam stepped out, caught sight of the 3 of us without pretending not to. Eliza composed, me idle, the empty space where Cass should have been, and checked her watch. The second hand swept to 59. "It's almost 4, Eliza said. "Good," I said. "Let's see who can't resist the sound a fork makes when it hits the floor." The minute hand clicked to the top, and for a second nothing happened, which was worse than a crash. The corridor kept its hush, but the hush felt staged, like an audience holding its breath before the curtain goes up. I could feel Wolfe in his chair across town, massive and immovable, letting the city march to his pulse. He hadn't left the brownstone, but he was here just the same, waiting for me to reel in whatever fish had chosen 4 o'clock as their pond. Miriam opened her door, crisp as always, and looked directly at me. "Mr. Goodwin," she said, "apparently my schedule has taken liberties. Let's indulge it." She stepped back, leaving the door wide. Cass appeared behind her, as if summoned by the word indulge. She was smiling the way people do when they're rehearsing for juries. Eliza stood, smoothed her coat, and glanced at me for a signal. I gave her the smallest nod. She followed Miriam inside. The office had the kind of table you could lay out a body on if you were discreet and nobody minded signing for it. A wall of glass kept the city on display, smug and tall. Miriam gestured us to chairs like she was arranging a seating chart for an inquest. Cass slid into one with a languid grace that said she owned the floor even when she didn't. Eliza sat opposite, her back straight, her folder ready. I stayed a shade removed. My usual spot, the one that lets me see everyone's knees under the table. People forget their knees. Miriam opened. "We are all aware of the anomaly. I find it distasteful that my calendar has been commandeered for theatrics. Mr. Goodwin, do you have anything to declare before I call IT back in?" "I declare I didn't make the appointment," I said, "and that somebody with a taste for stainless steel thinks forks make good doorbells. Beyond that, I'm here because Wolfe told me to be. He didn't put himself on your schedule. Someone else did." Cass tilted her head. How convenient for Wolfe. To appear without asking, to have his man already embedded, and now to claim innocence. "Convenience not our brand," I said. "We prefer expensive." That earned me a sharp look from Miriam and a smug one from Cass. Eliza's eyes stayed level, though her knuckles pressed the folder hard enough to leave crescents. Before Miriam could retort, the door opened without a knock. Elijah, the junior, slipped in, flushed and breathless. "Sorry," he blurted, "but there's another message. The printer on the 9th floor. It printed one line before jamming. It says, 'The fork falls thrice.'" Cass let out a short laugh that had no humor. Miriam's jaw stiffened. Eliza stared at the tabletop as if listening for the sound. I looked at the boy. "Where's the page?" He held it up like evidence in Sunday school. Miriam snatched it and read, her lips tightening. She passed it to me without comment. The words were stark, blocky, ink slightly smeared. "The fork falls thrice." Nothing else. "Who saw this print?" I asked. "Only me," Elijah said. "It came out as I passed the machine. Then it jammed." "Of course it jammed," I said. "It's more dramatic that way." Miriam set her palms on the table. "Enough. This company does not run on riddles. Miss Vale, your access is suspended effective immediately until IT confirms otherwise. Mr. Goodwin, your presence is noted but not invited. And Miss Pierce," Cass raised her brows, expectant, "you may assist IT in tracing this nonsense back to whatever vendor has sold us defective systems." Cass looked delighted to be deputized. Eliza looked like a floor had opened beneath her. She started to protest, but Wolfe's voice came into my head clear as a bell. Retreat if pressed, but only after leaving a thorn. So I spoke before she could. "Ms. Prentice, if you suspend Eliza now, you'll hand whoever's orchestrating this their victory bow. She's the pivot. Remove her, and the message writer gets to claim she was guilty, no matter what the logs say. Keep her at her desk, and they'll have to escalate. and escalation is evidence. Miriam stared at me. You presume to dictate strategy in my office. Not strategy. Physics, I said. Remove the weight, the pendulum stops. Leave it, the clock keeps swinging until we see who's pushing. Elijah cleared his throat nervously. He's right. I need Eliza's input on the 6 o'clock deck. If she's locked out, the numbers collapse. Miriam flicked him a glance that could have shaved him bald, but she didn't contradict. She leaned back, thinking, then said coldly, Miss Vale will remain until 6. After that, we decide. Cass smirked, but it didn't reach her eyes. She knew the board had shifted. I looked at the fork wrapped in wax paper, resting on my knee. I unwrapped it and set it gently on the table. It gleamed under the office lights, diner steel reflecting the skyline. This came to Wolfe's door, I said, with a label. Audit the auditor. Somebody wants you to chase your own tail. Maybe Cass, maybe someone with longer arms. Either way, they're trying to turn suspicion into procedure, and procedure's slow. Wolfe isn't. Miriam eyed the fork as if it might stab her reputation. And what does Wolfe propose? He proposes nothing until he has all of you in the same room where he can see your faces, I said. He doesn't chase, he collects. If this game wants him, he'll oblige. You, Cass, Eliza, whoever else wants to play. 4 o'clock here was bait. 4 o'clock there will be truth. Eliza finally spoke. Quiet, but clear. If they promised 3 falls, then the 3rd is coming. And if it comes before 6, we'll know who needs it most. Silence took the room for a long breath. Outside, the city horns kept their racket. Inside, the air pressed like a held note. Miriam straightened, closed the folder before her, and said, Then we wait. I nodded, but I wasn't waiting. I was counting. The first fork had fallen in Miriam's office at 11:23. The second on our steps at 12:41. If the writer had rhythm, the 3rd would come soon, maybe sooner than they liked. And when it did, Wolfe would be listening with both ears and an appetite. I tapped the fork once against the table. Light, sharp, a reminder. Eliza flinched at the sound. Cass narrowed her eyes. Miriam stayed still. Elijah, poor kid, swallowed like the air had grown teeth. The fork didn't fall. Not yet, but it would. And whoever needed it to would be standing close when it did. The fork on the table sat between us like a dare. Nobody touched it. Miriam's gaze fixed on it, cool and contemptuous, as if by sheer authority she could make it vanish. Cass's smile thinned, her eyes sharp with calculation, and Eliza folded her hands in her lap, her knuckles pale. I let the silence stretch. Silence is an instrument. You hold it until someone plays against it. It was Elijah who broke first. If the 3rd's coming, he said too quickly, then maybe we shouldn't all sit here waiting to be the punchline. We should... Stay, Miriam cut him off. If someone thinks they can turn my office into a carnival, they will learn what it costs. She turned to me. You say Wolfe wants us in a room, then let him have his room, but here, not there. I will not dance attendance at his brownstone. That's the problem, I said. He doesn't dance attendance anywhere else either. He doesn't budge. If you want his deductions, you play on his rug. That's the only arena he allows. Cass tilted her head, amused. So we all parade into Wolfe's sanctum. Sounds theatrical. Exactly the kind of theater he'd enjoy. You'll forgive me if I doubt you've studied his tastes, I said. The only performance he values is when the facts arrange themselves so neatly even a fool can see the pattern. Eliza's voice was steady, though softer. It doesn't matter where the 3rd fork falls. It matters who's listening when it does. That drew a sharp look from Cass, who didn't like her assistant outphrasing her. Miriam didn't react, but her eyes flicked once to Eliza and back to me. If Wolfe insists, she said finally, then we will consider it. But only if I'm convinced this is more than office vandalism dressed in riddles. Show me substance, Mr. Goodwin. I nodded. Fair. I tapped the wax paper the fork had come in. Substance is in delivery. Someone planted a parasite in your supply. Closet. Not IT, not housekeeping, not chance. That's method. They fed printer queues with timed messages. That's reach, and they slipped forks into places they had no right to be. Your office, my door. That's intent. Whoever it is, they're inside, and they want you doubting your own staff. Cass leaned forward, her voice edged with mockery. Or maybe Wolfe sent you here to stir up paranoia and angle for a retainer. An investigator's trick. I smiled at her the way you smile at a wasp. Careful. Edged. If Wolfe wanted a retainer, he'd have sent you the bill already. This is about someone rattling your cages. And from where I'm sitting, you don't look very steady. Her cheeks flared, but she stayed quiet. Miriam raised a hand, ending the spat. She opened her mouth to answer when the office printer behind her desk groaned awake. Every head turned. The machine whirred, clicked, then spat a single sheet into the tray. The sound was too loud in that glass and steel room. Miriam rose and took the page. No header, no footer, just 3 words in bold block font. The third falls. The timing was perfect. 4:07. Cass muttered something under her breath. Eliza's eyes darted to me, sharp with fear and something else. Expectation. Miriam held the sheet between 2 fingers as though it were dirty. This, she said, is your proof? It's theirs, I corrected. And they're watching to see what you do with it. Her lips pressed into a line. She lowered the sheet and set it flat on the table beside the fork. The 2 artifacts together looked like an exhibit. Then tell me, Mr. Goodwin, she said. What does Wolfe say now? He says, I answered, that the third fall isn't a message. It's a trigger. Whoever's running this game will move now. They promised it. They can't resist keeping their promise. As if cued, Eliza's phone buzzed. She lifted it, glanced at the screen, and paled. Unknown number, she said. She set it on speaker. The voice was genderless, filtered, mechanical. 3 forks, 3 truths. Vale holds the handle. Wolfe holds the blade. The rest of you decide whether you eat. The line cut. Cass barked a laugh too loud to be natural. A prank. A bad one. Miriam didn't laugh. She looked at Eliza with a gaze sharp enough to draw blood. Explain why you are the name in that little performance. Eliza swallowed but didn't flinch. Because I was the one told to come here. Because I found the first fork. Because someone wants me to be the thread they pull. She's right, I said quickly. That's why they're framing her. But notice, they didn't say she is the fork. They said she holds the handle. Someone else is trying to make sure she gets burned when this pot boils over. Miriam turned the sheet so the words faced me. And what do you propose we do with this? I leaned back, calm as I could manage. We call Wolfe. We all meet at the brownstone. He'll separate the truth from the noise. If this is sabotage, if it's Cass or anyone else, he'll prove it. If it's just games, he'll prove that too. But you'll get certainty, and certainty's worth more than another dozen riddles. Miriam hesitated, weighing her pride against her need. Cass opened her mouth to object, but the printer stirred again, this time spitting 3 blank sheets in succession, like a mock applause. The tension in the room climbed another notch. Miriam set her jaw. Very well, we will come. Tonight. Eliza exhaled slowly, relief tempered with dread. Cass gave me a look that promised I'd pay for this suggestion later. Elijah just looked grateful he hadn't been asked to carry the papers. I gathered the fork and the page, slid them into my pocket. 8 o'clock, I said. The brownstone. Wolfe will be waiting. As we filed out, I felt the rhythm still beating under the surface. 1 fork, 2 forks, 3. The promise kept. Now the real play would begin, and Wolfe would have his stage. The cab ride back to the brownstone felt longer than it was. Eliza sat next to me, her shoulders squared but her hands tight in her lap. Cass had begged off, claiming she had obligations before 8 o'clock, which was as good as signing her name in the suspect column. Miriam had agreed to come, but not without reminding us twice that she did so for efficiency, not deference. Elijah had asked if he was needed, and Miriam had told him to stay put, her tone sharp enough to keep him in line. So it was just me and Eliza with the fork and the page, heading back to Wolfe. I don't like coincidences that walk on schedule, and 3 falls in less than 5 hours was too neat. Someone was pressing buttons, and we were all supposed to dance. Wolfe doesn't dance, which meant whoever was conducting was about to find out what happens when you aim the wrong tune at the wrong man. At the brownstone, Fritz opened the door with his usual grave courtesy, but his eyes flicked to Eliza like he was measuring whether she belonged in the house. He ushered her in without a word and closed the door behind us. The air smelled faintly of beer and saffron. Not saffron, Wolfe would insist, but safflower and orange peel. Wolfe was in his chair, the mountain as immovable as always. He had the little slip of paper from the saffron jar on the stand beside him, weighted with a paper knife. He raised his head as we entered, his eyes narrowing on Eliza. "Miss Vale," he said. "Sit." She obeyed, perching on the edge of the red leather chair opposite him. I set the fork and the page on the desk and gave Wolfe the shorthand of the afternoon. The printer messages, Miriam's reluctant agreement, Cass's escape, and the anonymous call. I left out nothing, not even the camera blink or Solano with his lemon wipes. When I finished, Wolfe grunted, low and displeased. "The sequence is vulgar," he said. "Childish increments. First fall, second, third. Bang, bang, bang. A nursery rhyme for clerks." He tapped the slip of paper. "2 falls make a pattern. 3 summon judgment." Pfui. The author fancies himself prophetic, but he lacks poetry. Eliza sat forward. "Then you think it's nothing more than a prank?" "No," Wolfe said. "A prank does not install parasites in supply closets. A prank does not meddle with saffron jars. Whoever does this wishes to unsettle, to erode confidence. You, Miss Vale, are the axis of their scheme. They have named you, marked you, and placed you in my path. That is the substance. The rest is garnish." She met his gaze without flinching. "Then I need you to clear me, before Miriam decides I'm expendable." "That may be," Wolfe said, "but I will not be ordered. I take a case when it interests me, not when desperation insists." I knew that tone. It meant Wolfe was already interested. He'd never admitted in front of her, but his nostrils had flared twice while I spoke, his equivalent of a dog wagging its tail. Eliza didn't press. Smart woman. She folded her hands again, patient. Wolfe let the silence thicken until the air felt like honey. Then he sighed and shifted his bulk. "Archie," he said, "at 8 they come. See that they arrive. Cass Pierce most of all. I will not proceed without her." "She may need persuasion," I said. "Then persuade her," Wolfe snapped. "She's central." "Why?" Eliza asked before I could. "Because she dislikes you," Wolfe said simply. "Hatred is an efficient vector. If she is guilty, it will be revealed. If she is innocent, her disdain will sharpen the picture. Either way, she must be present." He closed his eyes, signaling that he was finished with commentary. I rose, motioned for Eliza, and we withdrew. Fritz appeared with a tray, beer for Wolfe, chamomile tea for Eliza. He knows his business. In the hall, Eliza stopped me. "He already knows," she said. "He always does," I answered. "But he'll sit on it until you're squirming. That's his idea of sport." She smiled faintly. "The first time all day." "Then I'll hold still." It was 5:45. I had a little over 2 hours to round up Cass Pierce and make sure she didn't wriggle free. That meant legwork, and legwork was my department. I grabbed my hat and told Eliza to stay put under Fritz's watch. Wolfe didn't like strangers in the house, but once he'd told someone to sit, they were furniture until he said otherwise. Cass's apartment was a glass-front high-rise on the east side, paid for with bonuses that smelled like side channels. I didn't expect her home yet. Cass liked to linger where power was being handed out, but I wanted to see if her trail was warm. The doorman was brisk until I dropped Wolfe's name. That earned me a raised brow and a phone call upstairs. No answer. I waited in the lobby, flipping through a magazine that believed in watches more than men. At 6:20, Cass herself swept in, coat draped over her arm, phone in hand. She saw me before I moved and grimaced. "Of course," she said. "Wolfe's errand boy." "Errand man," I corrected. "And you've got an appointment at 8. Don't skip it." "I've no intention of spending my evening with Wolfe's orchids," she said, brushing past. "Then spend it saving your career," I said mildly. "Because when Miriam finds out how many side emails you've been juggling, she'll want more than orchids. Wolfe will either point at you or away from you. If you're absent, guess which direction he'll point." That hit. She paused at the elevator. Eyes narrowed. "And if I show up?" "Then you get a chance to defend yourself. Wolfe won't cut you slack, but he won't cut you down without reason either." She studied me for 3 beats, then jabbed the elevator button. 8 sharp, she said, if only to prove you wrong. The doors closed. I allowed myself a grin. That was one fish in the net. By 7:30, I was back at the brownstone. Eliza was in the office, steady but pale. Wolfe hadn't moved, but the saffron slip and the fork now sat side by side on his desk, like exhibits in a trial. Miriam arrived first, punctual to the second, her expression carved from disdain. Cass came 5 minutes later, perfectly turned out and perfectly annoyed. The stage was set. Wolfe opened his eyes, gestured faintly toward the chairs, and said in that voice that could command armies from a chair, "Now we begin." The office was set like a stage. Wolfe in his throne, immovable, Miriam rigid in the red leather, as though the seat itself were beneath her dignity. Cass leaning back with the poise of someone who'd trained mirrors to adore her. And Eliza, taut but composed, perched on the edge of her chair, eyes steady. The fork and the saffron slip lay on Wolfe's desk like courtroom exhibits. The air had that weight it gets before a storm, heavy, expectant, full of things unsaid. Wolfe let the silence build until even Cass shifted. Then he opened his eyes and spoke, each word placed like a stone. 3 forks, 3 falls, a childish conceit, yet executed with persistence. The question is not how, it is who and why. Miriam exhaled sharply. "We've indulged this long enough. My company's time is not a toy." "It is," Wolfe said evenly. "Precisely a toy, and someone is playing with it. If you wish me to end the game, you will endure my method." Cass gave a small laugh. "And your method is what? Lecturing us into guilt." "My method," Wolfe said, "is to reduce the noise until only the guilty sound remains. Miss Vale has been placed at the center of these theatrics. The intent is obvious: to discredit her, isolate her, and, if possible, have her discarded." "Why?" Eliza kept her hands, folded tight in her lap. "Because I noticed what I wasn't supposed to." Wolfe inclined his head. "Precisely. You observed Miss Pierce siphoning inquiries. You told your superior, Miss Prentice, you did nothing." Miriam bristled. "You overstep." "I recite," Wolfe corrected, "that inaction created opportunity. Miss Pierce became wary, Miss Vale became a target, and someone with sufficient access began leaving breadcrumbs, forks, emails, parasites in closets, all designed to force suspicion inward." Cass leaned forward, voice sharp. "You're accusing me outright?" "No," Wolfe said. "I'm examining you. You had motive, to silence an inconvenient assistant. You had access. Your status affords it. You had opportunity. Your comings and goings are less scrutinized than most. But a plan this clumsy does not fit you. You are a predator, Miss Pierce, but a direct one. You savor conquest, not riddles. This juvenile theater is not your style." Her eyes flashed, but she didn't argue. That told me Wolfe was right. Cass liked a fight, but only on her own terms. Wolfe shifted his gaze to Miriam. "You had knowledge. You knew of Miss Vale's observation. You chose to ignore it. That omission is curious." Miriam's lips thinned. "I did not ignore. I weighed. Cass's performance earns this firm millions. I will not cripple us on the word of a subordinate without evidence." "Then you invited manipulation," Wolfe said. "Someone exploited your hesitation, your refusal to act. They manufactured a crisis to force your hand. At best, it is sabotage. At worst, it is treachery." Her jaw flexed, but she kept her silence. Eliza spoke then, low but clear. "If not Cass, then who?" Wolfe closed his eyes briefly, then opened them bright and sharp. "The hand behind this prefers concealment. He hides behind scripts, behind system messages, behind housekeeping carts. But he overreached." He gestured to me. "Archie?" I rose and set the photo from my phone on the desk. The parasite device I'd seen in the supply closet, cube and all. "Spotted this warming the wallpaper. Not IT issue, not random junk. Planted." Wolfe tapped the photo with one finger. "And removed, hastily, by Mr. Solano, your custodian. Yet Mr. Solano is not the mind. He is a carrier. The mind belongs to one with the keys to your kingdom. The admin ops account." Eliza stiffened. "But that's shared. Multiple staff." "Yes," Wolfe said, "but the parasite's device name, Dinah Zuaso22. That is not random. That is a label. Someone with a taste for cheap forks and childish wordplay. Someone who thinks themselves clever, but who betrays themselves with eagerness." Cass sneered. "You make it sound like a ghost in the machine. Who, Wolfe?" "Stop circling." Wolfe's eyes went to Miriam. "Your husband." That landed like a blow. Miriam's spine snapped straight. "Ridiculous. He has nothing to do with operations." "He has," Wolfe said. "Everything to do with access, spousal privilege, informal passwords, the intimacy of shared devices. He could borrow your credentials, alter your calendar, schedule Wolfe himself, and leave the trail pointing to Miss Vale. His motive? Leverage. To expose or threaten, to profit from disruption, or simply to spite. A petty man, dissatisfied, is dangerous." Miriam rose, color high in her cheeks. "You dare!" "I do." Wolfe cut her off. "Consider the facts. The first fork fell in your office, an intrusion only possible with intimate access. The second at my door, requiring boldness and knowledge of my household. The third in your building's printers, orchestrated for spectacle. Each time Miss Vale was marked, but the true shadow was yours. Whoever sought to shake her loose wanted you unsettled, Miss Prentice. And who better to unseat you than the man at your table, silent, overlooked, yet with keys to every door?" The room went very still. Cass's eyes glittered with malice, but not triumph. This wasn't her victory. Eliza's breath caught, and she turned toward Miriam. Miriam stood frozen, her hands clenched. "You cannot prove this." "No," Wolfe asked. "Miss Vale, show the audit logs." She fumbled in her folder, produced the printed sheets, the ones she'd salvaged before IT scrubbed them. Wolfe pointed to the entry. "Note the creation time, 3:17 a.m. Miss Vale was asleep, Miss Pierce was elsewhere, but Mr. Prentice, your husband, was in your apartment, awake, logging through your device. An IP trace will confirm. The parasite was an anchor to disguise his trail, nothing more. His error was the vanity of the fork, his chosen emblem. Too consistent, too frequent. A true saboteur would not repeat himself." Eliza's eyes widened with dawning clarity. He wanted me blamed because I was expendable and because Miriam would see what she'd refused to before. Wolfe inclined his head. Exactly. It was not merely attack, but message. Audit the auditor. Miriam's voice was low, icy. If this is true, then I have been played for a fool. Cass's smile curved like a knife. We all have. Wolfe raised a hand. You may choose your recourse, legal, corporate, personal. That is your affair, but this house will not be used for pantomime. The forks have fallen, the game is revealed. Judgment, as the note proclaimed, is yours. Miriam sank back into her chair, stunned, staring at nothing. Cass looked pleased, though whether at Miriam's humiliation or her own escape was hard to tell. Eliza sat very still, the tension draining from her shoulders. Wolfe leaned back, closed his eyes, and reached for his beer. Pfui, he said softly. Utensils. The case had cracked, but the aftermath would cut sharper than the forks ever had. The silence that followed Wolfe's declaration was the kind that settles in after a lamp shatters in a crowded room. Nobody moved at first. Miriam's face was carved from granite, but her eyes betrayed the storm beneath. Cass's smirk had turned feline, satisfied but cautious. Eliza, who had been a coil of tension for hours, now looked both vindicated and hollow, as if relief had left her without bones to stand on. Wolfe didn't care for dramatics after he'd spoken the core truth. He sipped his beer with a grunt that dismissed the room itself. That left me to handle the living fallout. I leaned back in my chair. Well, I said, if you wanted a memorable evening, you've got one. Not every day you find out the enemy's been eating at your table. Miriam's head snapped toward me. Do not presume to lecture me. Lecture? I raised a brow. No, ma'am, just a reminder. Wolfe doesn't guess. If he says your husband's behind this, then you'd better start checking what other forks he's been dropping in your life, and not the stainless kind. Cass seized the opening like it was hers by right. This changes everything, Miriam. If your own household is the source, then how can you lead the firm without the stink clinging? Clients won't separate your name from his. Miriam's glare could have cut marble. Be careful, Cass. Oh, I intend to be, Cass purred. More careful than you've been, apparently. Eliza shifted, uneasy with the sparring. She spoke up before the sparks turned flame. What happens now? If Mr. Prentice is the one, then surely he'll anticipate Miriam learning the truth. He'll be preparing another move. Wolfe set down his glass. Correct, he said. He will expect suspicion, denial, perhaps confrontation. He will not expect method. That is where we retain advantage. His eyes opened, dark and steady. Miss Vale, you must return to the office tomorrow as if nothing has been discovered. Routine is armor. Any deviation alerts him. Her lips pressed together, but she nodded. Miriam let out a sharp laugh. You expect me to play along, as if my husband has not humiliated me. I expect you, Wolfe replied coldly, to decide whether you prefer private humiliation or public ruin. If you confront him without evidence, you hand him freedom. If you rage without proof, you burn your own house. But if you hold, if you wait, I will provide what the law cannot shrug aside. That hit home. Miriam's nostrils flared, but she said nothing. Cass leaned back with folded arms, the smile creeping back. Convenient, isn't it? You let Wolfe do your dirty work, Miriam, and you come out clean. Meanwhile, the rest of us play pieces in his parlor games. Better pieces than pawns, I told her. She met my gaze coolly. I'm no pawn. No, Wolfe said, his voice like a lid settling on a pot. You are an opportunist. You will twist this to your benefit, as is your nature. But in this matter, you will do nothing until I permit. If you interfere, you may find yourself mistaken for the hand behind the forks. Do not test me. Cass's expression faltered for a fraction, then smoothed. She didn't answer. The air thickened again. Eliza cleared her throat softly. "Mr. Wolfe, if you can prove it was him, what happens to me?" Wolfe regarded her for a long moment. "You are exonerated. You retain your position, though it will never again be secure, for Miss Prentice now knows you are not invisible. Whether that is a blessing or curse depends on what you choose to become." Her eyes lowered, thoughtful. I checked my watch. "It's late. We've got a suspect at large, a company in knots, and a client deciding whether to explode or implode. Anything else you want me to chase tonight, Wolfe?" He shut his eyes, sinking back into the chair. "No. Tomorrow, Archie, you will secure confirmation. Logs, traces, and if possible, testimony. Speak to this Solano." He touched the parasite. "He may know whose hand gave it him, and find out where Mr. Prentice spends his midnight hours. Men who meddle with machines at 3 a.m. are rarely discreet in other pursuits." "Got it." Miriam rose suddenly, stiff with dignity that had to be held together by sheer will. "We are finished here." "You are," Wolfe said, "when I say so. Sit." She froze, then after a beat, lowered herself again, fury written in every line. Wolfe opened his eyes. "Miss Prentice, you came here because you were forced. You will leave because I permit. Remember that when you decide how to address your husband. He sought to humiliate you. Whether you suffer or triumph is now in your control." It was the closest Wolfe came to mercy, and Miriam recognized it. She inclined her head a fraction. "Very well. I will wait." That was the end of the evening's performance. Wolfe rang for Fritz, who ushered them out one by one. Cass swept past me with a whisper meant to sting. "You're enjoying this too much, Goodwin." "Not half as much as you will when Miriam's back is turned," I answered, which wiped the smirk for a second. Eliza lingered at the door, her gaze on Wolfe. "Thank you," she said simply. Wolfe waved a hand, already closing his eyes. "Thank me when you're safe." "Not before." Then she was gone, the brownstone door shutting on the outside world. I returned to the office. Wolfe hadn't moved, but his fingers drummed once on the arm of the chair. That was his idea of a raised eyebrow. "Well?" I asked. He rumbled low. "We are near the marrow. Tomorrow, Archie. Confirmation. And be swift. A man revealed is a man cornered. Cornered men are dangerous." I nodded, hung up my hat, and thought about 3 forks, a crooked picture frame, and a husband with too much time at night. Tomorrow was going to be sharp. Morning came with a kind of grey light that makes the city look hungover. Wolfe was in the plant rooms, communing with his orchids, which meant I had a window to do the legwork. He'd given me my marching orders. Solano, the custodian, and then the shadow habits of Mr. Prentice. The trick with Wolfe is that he doesn't give errands. He gives trajectories. If I came back without a thread to pull, he'd let me stew in silence until I wished I'd found one. Prentice and Doyle's lobby looked the same as yesterday, but now I had eyes tuned to its undercurrents. Security was stiff, the receptionist was brisk, and Solano, the man with lemon wipes, was easy enough to find. His cart was parked by a stairwell, neat as a priest's pew, and he was polishing a handrail like it was going to be inspected. "Morning," I said, casual. He glanced up, recognized me, and straightened. "Sir." "Don't call me sir, it makes me feel guilty. Name's Goodwin. We talked yesterday." He nodded, wary. I gestured at the cart. "You mind if we take a little walk? Nothing serious, just fresh air and a cup of coffee on me." His brow furrowed, but he left the rag folded and followed me outside. Around the corner, a diner leaned against the block like it had been stapled there 40 years ago. We slid into a booth. I ordered coffee. He didn't. "You moved something yesterday," I said without preamble. "Out of a closet you shouldn't have been in. I'm not here to jam you up, Solano. I'm here to find out who told you." He looked down at his hands. Calloused, rough workers' hands, but they clenched like a kid's. "I don't want trouble," You've already got it, I said. You took out a cube that didn't belong, a cube planted to frame someone. If you don't talk, the one who gave it to you will leave you holding the bag. You'll be the man who planted it, not the man who carried it. That got him. His throat bobbed. It was left for me, he muttered. On the cart. No note, no words. Just a little envelope with $50. And you didn't wonder? I wondered plenty, he said. But rent don't care about wondering. I was told to throw it out with the trash. So I did. Who told you? He hesitated. I didn't see him. Call came on the staff line, said it was IT, said there was old equipment in the closet, I'd find it and I should remove it. Didn't even sound like an order, more like they knew I'd do it if they left cash. Male voice? Yes. Accent? He shook his head. Flat. Could have been anybody. Except it wasn't anybody, I said. It was somebody who knew the staff line, knew your schedule, knew you'd obey if the nudge was right. He rubbed his temples. I don't want to lose my job. You won't, I said. You'll give me the details. The exact time of the call, what number it came from if you remember, and I'll see to it Wolfe clears your name before anyone upstairs thinks to drag it. He looked at me, searching. Then he gave a tight nod. 10:30, yesterday morning. Number was blocked. But he called me Solano, not Mr., not hey you. My name. I leaned back. Which means he knew who'd pick up. That's not IT. That's personal. I left him there with his coffee cooling and headed back toward Midtown, thinking it over. Wolfe would love the detail. Names, a power. Whoever was pulling strings had reached down far enough to make Solano feel seen. It was a manipulator's move, and one that stank of domestic familiarity. Next stop was Mr. Prentice. Miriam's husband wasn't hard to trace. His name had popped up on articles about philanthropy and one too many panel talks where middle-aged men explained the future of publishing. I found him at a members-only club that had chandeliers and leather chairs designed to smell like legacy. He was easy to spot, fit in the way men get fit when personal trainers do the sweating for them, hair silvering at the temples, eyes that liked mirrors. He was talking to a pair of associates, but I waited until he peeled off toward the bar. Mr. Prentice, I said. He turned, a faint frown. Do I know you? No, but your wife does, and so does Wolfe. That made him pause. His lips compressed, then curved into something like a smile. Ah, the detective. You must be his legman. Guilty, I said. And you, sir, are guilty of midnight hobbies. Forks, emails, parasites. Ring any bells? He didn't flinch. That was the tell. A guilty man tries too hard to look blank. You're mistaken, he said smoothly. I don't dabble in IT nonsense. Then you'll forgive me if I don't believe you. 3:17 a.m., your device, your apartment, your wife's account. You planted Wolfe on her calendar like a signature. You framed her assistant like a schoolyard bully, and you thought nobody would track the trail. He swirled the drink he hadn't yet sipped. You can't prove any of that. Not yet, I said. But we will. And here's the kicker. You wanted Miriam rattled. You wanted her position questioned. Maybe to leverage her. Maybe to punish her. But now you're cornered. His eyes narrowed. Be careful, Mr. Goodwin. You're making accusations you can't substantiate. I don't need to, I said. Wolfe will, and when he does, you'll wish you'd confessed to me in this cozy leather cave instead of having it read back to you in front of your wife, your board, and the police. For the first time, his confidence cracked. Just a flicker. His hand trembled, a tremor quickly suppressed. He set the glass down too carefully. I think this conversation is over, he said. Not yet, I answered. You'll be hearing from us tonight. Bring your appetite. It's going to be a feast of facts. I left him there, polished and brittle, and stepped back into the afternoon air. Wolfe would be pleased. We had Solano's testimony. We had Prentice's crack, and we had enough rhythm in the fork game to tie it all. The only thing left was the gathering Wolfe always loved, the moment when truth stopped hiding and everyone else wished they'd left the city for the weekend. Back at the brownstone, I hung my hat and gave Wolfe the rundown. He listened, eyes shut, nodding once at Solano's detail, again at Prentice's crack. "Excellent," he murmured. "Tonight, Archie. Tonight we break the final egg." And with that, he closed his eyes, folded his hands, and left me to prepare the room for judgment. The room was heavy with expectation. Miriam sat stiff-backed, her face pale but controlled. Cass crossed one leg over the other, her posture the picture of elegance, but her eyes sharp as razors. Eliza held herself taut, hands folded tight in her lap, waiting for the verdict that might save her or finish her. Wolfe leaned in his chair, immense and immovable, his lids lowered, but his voice carrying with the weight of a gavel. "Ladies," he began, "you have been the audience to a pantomime. Forks, falls, riddles, and devices. Childish theatrics, but not meaningless. The hand behind them is revealed, and the pattern is complete." Miriam's voice was a blade. "Say it, Wolfe." "I have," he said. "Your husband." The words struck like stones in water, ripples moving outward, silent but unstoppable. Miriam's lips trembled, just once, before her control returned. Cass let out a faint, delighted laugh. Eliza drew a sharp breath, her eyes wide. Wolfe went on. The parasite in the closet was not an IT oversight. It was planted. Solano, your custodian, was manipulated into removing it, paid, directed, and addressed by name from a blocked call. Only one with personal knowledge of the staff would attempt such familiarity. The audit logs, created at 3:17 a.m., tie directly to your device, Miss Prentice, and thus to your household. Not to Miss Vale. Not to Miss Pierce. The hand was Mr. Prentice's. Miriam pressed her fingers against her temples. "Why? Why would he?" "Because you ignored Miss Vale's warning," Wolfe said, his tone heavy. "Because your refusal to act against Miss Pierce's indiscretions created a vulnerability. Your husband exploited it. He sought to shake your certainty, to make your competence seem fragile. Perhaps to leverage control over you, perhaps to undermine your standing, perhaps simply to punish. Men of vanity often require pretexts more than motives." Cass leaned forward, a predator's gleam in her eye. "So the great Miriam Prentice is undone by her own husband." Delicious. Wolfe turned his gaze on her, cold and cutting. "Do not gloat, Miss Pierce. You are no innocent. You have siphoned inquiries, created shadow dealings. You were reckless. Miss Vale saw it. That truth remains, and Miriam will have to deal with you in her own house. But this vulgar fork game, was not yours." Cass stiffened, her smirk fading. Miriam turned to her with a stare that promised storms to come. Wolfe shifted his bulk, the chair creaking under him. "Miss Vale," he said, "you are exonerated. You were made the scapegoat, chosen because you noticed what others ignored. You may return to your work if Miss Prentice allows. Whether you thrive or suffer will depend on your resolve. You are no longer invisible. Take care with what you choose to be." Eliza's throat worked. "Thank you," she said quietly. Miriam stood then, tall and rigid, her pride scarred but not broken. "I will deal with my husband," she said, her voice measured. "And with Miss Pierce. The firm will not be made a playground for egos." Cass opened her mouth, but one look from Miriam kept her silent. Wolfe closed his eyes, signaling the evening's end. "Then you are dismissed. Archie, see them out." I did, shepherding Cass with a look that promised no sympathy, guiding Miriam, who carried herself like a general, retreating with her banner intact, and steadying Eliza, whose step was lighter now, but whose eyes carried the weight of what she'd endured. When the door shut, the brownstone exhaled, Silence returned, deep and almost holy. I went back to the office. Wolfe had already reached for his beer, the saffron slip and the fork pushed aside as if they'd never existed. "Well," I said, "you've done it again. You toppled a household without leaving your chair." He grunted. "Pui, utensils and vanity, a childish man with midnight toys. But human folly, Archie, is the one renewable resource." I smiled, hanging my hat. "And what about forks?" Wolfe took a long sip of beer, set the glass down and shut his eyes. "Knives cut, spoons hold, but forks are indecisive. Men who choose them for symbols deserve what follows." Dinner was served an hour later. Trout with saffron rice. Real saffron this time, Fritz made sure. The house was quiet again, as it was meant to be, and if a fork slipped and clattered against a plate, Wolfe ignored it because the case was closed and the brownstone had returned to its order. That's life with Wolfe. Chaos comes knocking, but it always leaves by the door.